Hey everyone, welcome to the channel, and in this video, I'm back to making a GeoGuessr tips video. It's been a really long time since I've done one of these. I think my last one was a guide to polls, and you guys really seemed to enjoy that one. The reception for that was quite good, and it's been a really long time since I've done a video like that. And I'm really enjoying this style of like a guide to, and then something in GeoGuessr. So I chose road lines this time because I know most of my road lines pretty well. I think I can share those with you. Of course, if I get anything wrong or I miss out on anything, please let me know in the comments. I also am a little bit sick, so if I sound a little bit off, it's because I'm sick. Sorry about that. Can't really do much. But let's go into it. Now, just like last time with my polls video, there are going to be timestamps down below, so you can search by continent. I won't do it by country, I'll do it by continent. So if there's a continent you're struggling with or a country you're struggling with, just use the timestamps down below. But other than that, hopefully you enjoy. And we're just going to start off right away with Canada. Now, Canada is often confused with the US, especially if you're newer to the game. But one of the best ways to tell, especially if you're in a city, is going to be the road lines. Now, this isn't 100% of the time, but it's quite common that in Canada, you'll have a single yellow road line. Down residential streets, on highways and stuff, it is often a double yellow road line, but especially in cities, it's gonna be a single yellow road line. There was some confusion to that last time I talked about it, so hopefully that clears some stuff up. Now, the US, which is the other only English-speaking country in the Americas that has official street view coverage, is often confused with Canada, like I said. And in the US, especially in cities, you'll often find a double yellow road line, unlike Canada, which often uses single road lines. Now, moving down to South America, we have Brazil. And Brazil's road lines at first don't really stand out until you really pay attention to it. And that's just because they kind of have a bit of a red tint to them, as well as they're kind of thicker. Like they just have a bit more thickness to them than what you might see in other Latin American countries that you might confuse it with. And a lot of the time, countries in this region of the world have very similar looking road lines. Of course, not all of them will. Argentina, you can often find this road line pattern of having a single yellow road line with a dashed white road line. And of course, a lot of the time it will just be a double yellow road line. But you can sometimes find this pattern, and that's pretty common in Argentina. And occasionally in Uruguay, you can also find that pattern as well. But you can find this unique road line pattern where it's two double yellow road lines with a dashed white in between. Now, moving on to Europe, and similar to the US and Canada, it's often quite common for newer players to get Ireland and the UK confused, as they both speak English and look pretty similar overall, but especially in Irish cities, you can find this yellow road line on the side of the road. And this is mostly in like urban areas, but you can sometimes find it other places as well. And you can also find this in New Zealand, which we'll get to later. Speaking of small countries that border France, we have Monaco. Now, normally, even before I played GeoGuessr, I was able to identify Monaco just by its like skyline. It's pretty iconic. But for whatever reason, if you can't do that, its road lines are also kind of weird. You have these massive, very thick inner road lines that are white and they're dashed. And you also have like these red crosswalks. You probably don't need to know this because you should be able to just identify Monaco just from like looking at it. It's pretty iconic, but if you can't, hopefully that helps. Now, moving on to the Nordic countries, and a lot of the time, if you don't know the difference between the two, they can be pretty tricky to tell apart because all the languages look quite similar. But one of the best ways to tell the Nordics apart from Iceland, which is kind of its own thing, is the road lines. Now, in Norway, you can often find these really long inner yellow road lines. In Sweden, you can pretty much always find these dashed outer lines like this. Finland actually uses all white road lines, but sometimes uses double lines and sometimes uses dashed lines like this. And in Denmark, you can find these very short dashed lines on the side of the road. Now, moving on to Africa, and in Africa, there's not really many road lines that you need to remember, but there's one. and that is in not a specific country, but a region, and that is the kind of southern African region. So that's Botswana, South Africa, Lesotho, and Eswatini, and they all have these outer yellow road lines. And that's about it. And then there's other ways to tell the countries apart that I went over in my African tips video, which I'll link right here. Speaking of outer yellow road lines, though, we have Asia, and in the Middle East, a lot of countries will have these outer yellow road lines as well. Of course, this is in the northern hemisphere, not southern Africa. Of course, there's lots of ways. This is Israel, for example. We have Israeli poles and Israeli license plates. But Jordan will also have these outer yellow road lines right here, but we have the Jordan black car like this. The UAE will also have these outer yellow road lines, but of course we have the UAE white car and these sand dunes that are pretty distinct to the region. And interestingly enough, the only country in the Middle East with official Google coverage that doesn't have these outer yellow road lines is Qatar. And while the coverage in Qatar is very limited, it's still another unique way of telling the country apart from a very similar country like the UAE, for example. That's about it for Asian road lines, but we have one more continent to cover, and that's Oceania. So here we have Australia. And like I was saying earlier about how South Africa has the yellow outer road lines, quite often new players can get Australia and South Africa confused because they have pretty similar climates and they're both in the southern hemisphere. So it makes sense. But Australia will have all white road lines. You won't see a single yellow road line anywhere, pretty much. While South Africa obviously has outer yellow road lines that make that country pretty unique. Now, like I was saying earlier, in Ireland, you can find those outer yellow road lines, especially in cities and urban areas. You can also find this in New Zealand, and that's another way to tell urban New Zealand apart from urban Australia, because they can look quite similar as well. Anyways, that's pretty much it for this video. If you enjoyed, remember to leave a like. Of course, if I missed anything or left anything out, please comment it. If you're new to the channel and haven't subscribed yet, please consider it. It really helps out the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.